The observation deck of Summit Station gleamed like a jewel suspended in the void, its transparent walls offering an unobstructed view of the Saronine's violet moon. Rising against a backdrop of infinite stars, Corporal Jensen Vale stood at attention near the eastern archway, his dress uniform pristine, his expression carefully neutral. At his hip, wrapped in worn leather and aged silk, hung a wakizashi, a companion sword to the katana his great-grandmother had carried. During the Mars Rebellion, the blade was 400 years old, its steel folded 10,000 times, and it was the only piece of home he'd carried across 3 star systems. To this forsaken diplomatic station, he wasn't supposed to be here. Combat infantry didn't usually attend peace summits, but when Ambassador Reeves requested an honor guard familiar with old Earth traditions, Jensen's commander had volunteered him without hesitation. Now he stood among delegates from 40 worlds, feeling distinctly out of place as alien dignitaries glided past in robes that shimmered with bioluminescent patterns. Is that supposed to be a weapon? The voice was melodic, lilting, touched with barely concealed amusement. Jensen turned to find himself face to face with the most striking being he'd ever seen. She was Velthri. He recognized the species from briefings, with skin the color of twilight amethyst and hair that cascaded down her back in waves of pure silver. Her eyes, large and luminous like twin moons, fixed on the wakizashi with undisguised curiosity. She wore a flowing gown of starlight-threaded fabric that seemed to move of its own accord, marking her as someone of considerable status. "It's a ceremonial blade, ma'am," Jensen replied, keeping his tone respectful. "Ceremonial," she repeated, stepping closer. Her movements were fluid, almost predatory. "Meaning decorative, meaning useless." She gestured to the weapon with one elegant finger, her lips curving into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "My people abandoned such primitive tools 3 millennia ago. Why would anyone carry a piece of sharpened metal when we have particle disruptors that can atomize a target from orbit?" Jensen felt heat rising in his chest, but kept his expression neutral. "With respect, Mum, not everything is measured by its capacity for destruction." "Oh." She tilted her head, genuinely intrigued now. "Then what does it measure? Sentimentality? Nostalgia? How very human." The last word dripped with condescension before Jensen could respond. A tall Velthri male appeared at the woman's elbow. His robes were even more elaborate, marked with diplomatic seals. "Serafini," he said quietly, his tone warning. "Father is waiting." So this was Serafini Vex, daughter of Ambassador Torin Vex, the Velthri delegation's lead negotiator. Jensen had heard rumors, brilliant, headstrong, openly skeptical of the peace process. She studied him for another moment, her silver eyes searching his face as if looking for something worth finding. "Perhaps you'll have a chance to demonstrate your blade's value, Corporal," she said, her smile sharpening. "Though I suspect you'll find it rather inadequate when measured against real challenges." She turned away, her gown trailing behind her like liquid moonlight. Jensen watched her go, his jaw tight. He'd faced plasma fire, dodged orbital strikes, watched good soldiers die in his arms. But somehow, this privileged diplomat's daughter had managed to get under his skin with nothing but words. The evening's main event was a cultural exhibition in the Grand Hall. Representatives from each world displayed artifacts, technologies, or art forms unique to their civilizations. Jensen found himself positioned near the human delegation's display, a collection of historical weapons spanning humanity's evolution from stone tools to plasma rifles. At its center, on a pedestal of polished obsidian, rested his wakizashi. He'd argued against including it. The blade was personal, sacred, but Ambassador Reeves insisted it would show humanity's respect for tradition, proof they weren't just another expansionist species drunk on military power. Serafini approached the display with a small entourage, her father at her side. Ambassador Vex was older, his violet skin marked with patterns that seemed to shift in the light, his silver hair bound in elaborate braids. His expression was unreadable as he studied the weapons, but Serafini made no effort to hide her disdain. "Fascinating," she said, loud enough for nearby delegates to hear. "A timeline of humanity's violent evolution, from clubs to plasma cannons, but the philosophy remains unchanged: solve problems through force." "That's not what these represent," Jensen said, stepping forward before he could stop himself. Every protocol in the book screamed at him to stay silent, but something about her casual dismissal ignited a fury he couldn't contain. Seraphine's eyes widened slightly, surprised he'd spoken. "No, then enlighten me, Corporal. What does that," she gestured at the wakizashi, "represent besides humanity's primitive attachment to violence?" Jensen moved to the display, his hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "My great-grandmother carried this blade through the Mars Rebellion. She never killed anyone with it. Not once." "How restrained," Serafini said dryly. "She carried it," Jensen continued, his voice quiet but firm, because it reminded her what she was fighting for. Every time she drew it, she had to look at her reflection in the steel. She had to see herself, remember she was human, remember she could still choose mercy when the world demanded blood. For the first time, Seraphine's expression shifted. Something flickered behind those luminous eyes, not quite understanding. "But the beginning of curiosity, the blade," Jensen said, "isn't about killing. It's about bearing the weight of choice. It's about—" The station shuddered violently. Alarms screamed to life. Through the observation windows, Jensen saw 3 unmarked ships dropping out of subspace, their hulls bristling with weapons. Pirates drawn to the summit like vultures to wounded prey. The first blast hit the western wing. Delegates screamed, scrambling for exits. Jensen's training kicked in instantly. He grabbed the wakizashi, drew it in one smooth motion, and scanned for threats. Through the chaos, he spotted Serafini, separated from her father, frozen in shock as a section of the ceiling began to collapse. Jensen didn't think. He ran, his boots pounding against marble. He reached her as debris rained down, pulling her against him and raising the wakizashi. The blade caught a falling beam, deflecting it just enough to send it crashing beside them instead of through them. The impact sent vibrations screaming up his arm, but the steel held. Serafini stared up at him, her silver eyes wide with something that looked like wonder. "You saved me with a primitive piece of metal." "No," Jensen said, pulling her toward the emergency exit as another explosion rocked the station. "I saved you because I chose to. The blade just reminded me I could." Her fingers tightened around his arm as they ran through smoke and chaos. And for the first time since they'd met, Serafini Vex had nothing to say. The crystal caves beneath the Saranines surface glowed with bioluminescent fungi, casting everything in shades of blue and violet. Jensen pressed his back against the cold stone wall, his wakizashi still gripped in his right hand while his left supported Talon Reeves, his wounded comrade. The young private had taken shrapnel to his leg during their escape from the station, and every step left a dark trail on the crystalline floor. "Should have left me topside," Talon muttered through gritted teeth, his freckled face pale with blood loss. "Not how this works," Jensen replied. Scanning the cavern entrance for pursuers, Serafini knelt beside a shallow pool, tearing strips from her ruined gown to fashion bandages. Her silver hair was matted with dust, her perfect composure shattered, but her hands remained steady as she worked. Behind her, Navarra Quinn, her bodyguard, stood watch with a particle disruptor, her violet skin nearly invisible against the cave walls. Navarra was shorter than Serafini, more compact, with hair cropped close to her skull and eyes that never stopped moving. She'd appeared during the attack like a shadow given form, cutting through pirates with ruthless efficiency, until she'd found her charge fleeing with a human soldier. The suspicion in her gaze when she first saw Jensen had been palpable, but she'd said nothing, simply helped them escape into the maintenance tunnels that led to these forgotten caves. "This is inadequate," Serafini said, holding up the makeshift bandages. "He needs proper medical attention. Station's compromised," Navarra said flatly. "Medical bay was hit in the first wave. We're on our own until the fleet arrives." "How long?" Jensen asked. 6 hours. "Maybe 8. Navarra's expression darkened. "If the pirates don't find us first." Talon laughed weakly. "So we're hiding in a cave with a princess and her guardian angel. My mom's gonna love this story." "I'm not a princess," Serafini said, but her tone was gentle as she began wrapping Talon's leg. "My father is a diplomat, not royalty. Could have fooled me." Talon winced as she tightened the bandage. "You've got the whole looking down on everyone thing perfected." Jensen shot him a warning look, but Serafini surprised them both by laughing a real laugh, not the cutting mockery from before. "You're right. I was insufferable." She glanced at Jensen, something vulnerable flickering across her features. "I'm sorry for what I said about your blade." Jensen sheathed the wakizashi slowly, the familiar weight settling against his hip. "You meant it." "I did," she admitted. "But I was wrong." She finished securing Talon's bandage and stood, moving to the pool to wash the blood from her hands. "When that ceiling fell, I froze. All our technology, all our advancement, and I couldn't move. You moved." Without hesitation, training, Jensen said simply no. She turned to face him, water dripping from her fingers. "It was choice, like you said." Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "My brother would have understood that." The words hung in the air between them. Navarra's head snapped towards Serafini, her expression shocked. "Serafini, it's all right, Nive." Serafini wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking smaller despite her height. "They should know. If we're going to survive together, they should know." Jensen waited, instinct telling him this moment was fragile. "Important. I had a brother," Serafini said, her luminous eyes fixed on the glowing pool. "Dante. He was older by 3 years, and he was everything I'm not: brave, warm, certain of his place in the universe." She smiled sadly. "He loved studying other cultures, human culture especially. He said humanity had something we'd lost in our pursuit of perfection." "What happened to him?" Talon asked quietly. 5 years ago, there was an incident on the border colony of Vesper Prime. Raiders attacked a human settlement. My brother was serving as a junior diplomat there. Her voice cracked. He found a human family trapped in their hab unit, a mother and 2 children. He gave them his emergency beacon, told them to run. Then he stayed behind to slow the raiders. Jensen's chest tightened. "He bought them time." "Yes." Tears traced silver paths down her violet cheeks. "They found him 3 days later. He'd held the corridor using a human blade he'd taken from a museum display. A cavalry saber. He'd never been trained for combat, never held a weapon in his life. But he stood there, and he chose to give those strangers a chance to live." Navarra moved closer, her hand finding Seraphine's shoulder. The gesture was gentle, protective. "He saved them," the bodyguard said. "All 3 survived because of him." "I know," Serafini whispered. "I know he was brave. I know he was a hero. But all I could think was how foolish it was. How a particle disruptor could have stopped the raiders from a safe distance. How his sentimentality got him killed." She looked at Jensen, her eyes bright with pain. "I blamed the blade. I blamed human influence. I blamed everything except the truth." "What truth?" Jensen asked. "That he died free," Serafini said. "That he made a choice no algorithm could calculate, no efficiency metric could justify. He stood in that corridor because it was right, not because it was logical. And I've spent 5 years trying to prove that didn't matter. That cold logic was superior to warm hearts." She laughed bitterly. "But when that ceiling fell, when I faced death for the first time, I understood. Logic didn't save me, you did. Because you chose to." The cave fell silent except for the distant drip of water and Talon's labored breathing. Jensen moved closer to Serafini, drawn by something he couldn't name. In the blue-violet light, she looked like something from a dream, beautiful and broken and real. "My great-grandmother," he said quietly, "used to tell me that the wakizashi isn't really a weapon. It's a mirror. Every time you draw it, you see who you are in that moment. Brave or cowardly, merciful or cruel. It forces you to face yourself." Seraphine's breath caught. "What do you see when you look?" "Someone who's tired of war," Jensen admitted. "Someone who wants to believe there's more to life than surviving." Someone who he hesitated, then continued. "Someone who looked at you tonight and saw past the arrogance to the person underneath. Someone worth saving." Her hand rose slowly, tentatively, until her fingers brushed against his cheek. Her touch was cool, electric. "Show me," she whispered. "Show me how to hold something that matters more than logic." Jensen drew the wakizashi, the blade singing softly as it cleared the sheath. He turned it, offering her the hilt. "It's not about technique. It's about intent. Why are you holding it?" Serafini wrapped her fingers round the silk-bound hilt, her movements reverent. "To remember," she said. "To remember Dante. to remember what it means to choose. Good. Jensen moved behind her, adjusting her grip, his chest nearly touching her back. He could feel her trembling, could smell the faint scent that clung to her, something like crushed starflowers and ozone. Now breathe. Feel the weight. The blade doesn't give you strength. It reveals the strength you already have. They stood there in the glowing cave, human and Velthari, warrior and diplomat's daughter, while Navarro watched with knowing eyes and Talon tried not to smile through his pain. Serafini raised the wakizashi slowly, experimentally, the steel catching the bioluminescent light. I feel it, she whispered. I feel him, like he's here watching, proud that I finally understand. Jensen's hand covered hers on the hilt. He is proud. I guarantee it. She turned within the circle of his arms, still holding the blade between them. Their faces were inches apart, her luminous eyes searching his. When we get out of here, if we get out, my father will forbid this. Whatever this is, probably, Jensen agreed. My command will too. Fraternization with alien dignitaries is definitely against regulations. We come from different worlds, different star systems, he corrected, a small smile playing at his lips. This is illogical, she said. But she was leaning closer, completely irrational. He agreed. I'm still going to kiss you. I was hoping you would. Their lips met gently, tentatively, a bridge between species and philosophies and everything that should have kept them apart. The wakizashi hummed between them, its ancient steel vibrating with something that might have been approval from across the cave. Talon's stage whispered, I knew it. Navarra, you owe me 20 credits. The bodyguard's stern expression cracked into a rare smile. I'll pay you when we're not hiding from pirates. Serafini pulled back, laughing, her forehead resting against Jensen's. Your friend is insufferable. Learn from the best, Jensen said, earning him a playful punch to his shoulder. Above them, the station still burned. The pirates still hunted, were still waited, but in the crystal caves beneath the Saranine, for unlikely allies had found something worth more than survival. They'd found connection, understanding, and the fragile beginning of hope that even the deepest divides could be crossed with courage. And choice. The blade, passed between human hands and Velthari, had done what no diplomat could manage. It had shown them all that some truths transcended species, some bonds defied logic, and some loves were worth fighting for, no matter how impossible they seemed. The rescue shuttles arrived with dawn breaking over the Saranine, painting the devastated station in shades of amber and rose. Jensen emerged from the crystal caves with Serafini at his side, their fingers intertwined, while Navarra supported Talon between them. The scene that greeted them was chaos, medical teams rushing through debris, security forces securing the perimeter, and in the center of it all, two figures who made Jensen's heart sink. Ambassador Torin Vex stood beside Captain Helena Cross, commander of the human fleet. Both wore expressions that could cut steel. Serafini. Torin moved with surprising speed for someone his age, pulling his daughter into an embrace that was equal parts relief and barely contained fury. His silver hair was disheveled, his diplomatic robes scorched at the edges. Thank the ancestors. When the attack came, I thought. His voice broke, then hardened as his gaze fixed on Jensen. Step away from my daughter, Corporal. Captain Cross, a weathered woman with iron-gray hair and a scar bisecting her left eyebrow, strode forward with measured steps. Her uniform was immaculate despite the crisis, her bearing radiating authority. Vale, medical reports indicate you've been in close quarters with the Velthari delegation for 8 hours. I'll need a full debrief. Her eyes flicked to where his hand still held Seraphine's. Immediately. With respect, Captain Jensen began, but Cross cut him off with a raised hand. That wasn't a request. Corporal, Serafini stepped forward, her chin raised in defiance despite the exhaustion evident in every line of her body. Captain Cross, your soldiers saved my life, multiple times. If you're planning to reprimand him, what I plan, Cross interrupted coldly, is none of your concern. Miss Vex, this is a military matter. Everything is my concern when it involves the man I love. The words fell like a grenade into shocked silence. Torin's face cycled through disbelief, horror, and rage in rapid succession. Cross's expression remained carefully neutral, but Jensen saw the calculation behind her eyes. Navarra sucked in a sharp breath while Talon, despite his pain, grinned like he'd won a lottery. "Serafini," Torin said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You cannot possibly this human soldier. You've known him for less than a day." "I know," Serafini said, her voice steady even as tears gathered in her luminous eyes. "I know it's illogical. I know it violates every protocol. But when I held his blade, when he taught me what it meant to choose something bigger than fear or duty, I saw what Dante saw. I understood why he stood in that corridor. Because some things matter more than logic, Father. Some things are worth the risk." Torin flinched at his son's name. For a moment, grief and memory warred across his features. Then his expression hardened again. "Your brother died because of human sentimentality. I will not lose you to the same delusion. Dante died," Serafini said, her voice breaking, "because he chose love over safety. He chose strangers over himself. And you've spent 5 years pretending that made him a fool instead of a hero." The ambassador's hands trembled. "I pretended nothing. I grieved. You buried him," Serafini interrupted. "Just like you buried every feeling, every messy emotion that didn't fit your perfect diplomatic facade. You taught me to measure everything by efficiency and logic, because you were terrified of feeling the pain of losing him. But I can't live like that anymore. I won't." Captain Cross cleared her throat. "Touching as this family drama is, we have bigger problems. The pirates weren't random raiders." She pulled up a holoscreen, displaying tactical data. "They were hired. Someone wanted this summit disrupted. The Corvin Syndicate," Navarra said quietly. Everyone turned to look at the bodyguard, who straightened under their attention. "I ran facial recognition on the attackers. 3 were known Corvin mercenaries. They profit from conflict. Peace negotiations threaten their business, which means," Cross continued, "they'll strike again. Harder this time." Her gaze settled on Jensen and Serafini. "Which is why personal entanglements are not just inappropriate, they're dangerous. Emotions compromise judgment. I've seen good soldiers die because they prioritized feelings over tactics. And I've seen diplomats broker hollow peace," Torin added, "because they understood logic but not heart. My daughter is not a soldier, Captain. She's a liability in a combat situation, especially if your corporal is too busy protecting her to follow orders." Jensen felt Serafini stiffen beside him. Before she could respond, he stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Permission to speak freely, Captain." Cross studied him for a long moment, then nodded curtly. "Granted, you're both wrong," Jensen said. "You're both so focused on protecting your people that you can't see what's right in front of you. The Corvins don't want to stop peace, they want to prevent unity. Because unified, we're stronger. But you're doing their work for them by keeping us divided." "Corporal," Cross warned. "I'm not finished, ma'am." Jensen's hand found the wakizashi at his hip. "This blade is 400 years old. My great-grandmother carried it through a war that almost destroyed Mars. She taught my grandmother, who taught my mother, who taught me. And the lesson was never about combat. It was about understanding that true strength comes from knowing what you're fighting for." He drew the wakizashi slowly, the blade catching the morning light. Torin's guards tensed, but Jensen kept his movements deliberate, non-threatening. He turned the blade, offering it hilt first to Serafini. "Last night, I gave this to her," he said, "and she understood something I've spent my whole life learning. That weapons don't make you strong. Connections do. Trust does. Love does." He met Cross's gaze steadily. "You want to know if I can follow orders while caring about her? I followed every protocol that mattered. I protected civilians. I secured the objective. I brought my team home alive. Loving her didn't compromise my judgment, it sharpened it. Because now I have something worth surviving for." Serafini took the wakizashi with shaking hands, then did something that made both their superiors freeze. She drew a second blade from within Navarra's pack, her brother's cavalry saber, somehow recovered from the family archives. She held both blades crossed before her, human and Velthari steel forming an X. "My brother stood alone," she said, her voice ringing with conviction. "He fought with a human weapon and died protecting human lives. And you've spent 5 years calling it a tragedy, Father, when it was the most beautiful thing he ever did. He showed us that the divide between our species is an illusion, that we're stronger together than apart, She lowered the blades, extending each to their respective leaders. You can court-martial him, she told Cross. You can disown me, she told her father. But you can't stop what's already started. The pirates saw it when Jensen and I fought side by side. Nivara saw it. Talon saw it. And the Corvins know it. That's why they're so desperate to stop these talks. What exactly did they see? Torin asked, his voice carefully neutral. Hope, Serafini answered simply. They saw a human and a Velthri standing together, protecting each other, choosing each other despite every reason not to. And if we can do that, if two people from different worlds can find common ground in the middle of chaos, then maybe peace isn't just possible. Maybe it's inevitable. Talon, who'd been uncharacteristically quiet, spoke up from where medics were treating him. She's right, Captain. I watched them down there. Corp didn't hesitate to protect her, but he didn't abandon the mission either. And he grinned weakly. She learned to hold a blade in 8 hours better than some recruits learn in 8 months. Because he believed in her. That's not weakness. That's exactly what we need. Cross and Torin exchanged a long look, two leaders silently communicating in a language of shared burden and impossible decisions. Finally, Cross sighed, the sound heavy with resignation and perhaps the smallest hint of approval. Against my better judgment, she said, I'm going to trust your assessment, Vale. But understand this, you're now the face of human Velthri cooperation. If this relationship fails, if it compromises either of your judgments, it doesn't just affect you. It affects the entire peace process. I understand, ma'am, Jensen said. Torin turned to his daughter, his expression softening for the first time. Dante would have liked him, he admitted quietly. Your brother always saw the best in humanity. I suppose I should have trusted his judgment more. He reached out, touching Seraphine's cheek with a tenderness that spoke of years of buried grief. I cannot give you my blessing, not yet, but I will not stand in your way. That's enough, Serafini whispered, embracing her father. For now, that's enough. 3 months later, the Corvins did strike again, a coordinated assault on 5 border colonies simultaneously. But they met not divided forces, but a unified response. Human and Velthri ships fought side by side, their tactics integrated, their trust absolute. The battle was fierce but brief, and when it ended, the Corvin Syndicate's influence in the sector was shattered. The peace treaty was signed on the Saronine, in a rebuilt grand hall where the cultural exhibition had once stood. At the center of the room, on a shared pedestal of human oak and Velthri crystal, rested 2 blades, a wakizashi and a cavalry saber. Crossed in permanent union. Jensen stood in his dress uniform, Serafini beside him in robes that blended human and Velthri design, practical military cut, with flowing Velthri silk, silver embroidery tracing patterns from both their worlds. They were no longer just